Welcome to Divorcing Strong, the podcast that pulls no punches when it comes to divorce. I'm Becky Sampson, better known as Bulldog Becky Brockovich, and I'm here to give you the straight talk, the strategies, and the subpoena secrets you won't hear anywhere else. With expert guests and proven advice, you'll learn your rights, your options, and gain your power that encourages a fair and equitable outcome. Divorce doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome everybody to yet another episode of the Divorcing Strong podcast. I am Becky Sampson. I'm your host today. And man, this is my second podcast for today. And I can't tell you, I'm like really excited about this guest because just of my own situation where in my own divorce, where it was so important to get the right information. So before we get started, I'll kind of tell you a little about her, but Krista Shelton is the president and founder of Focused Forensic Solutions, a firm specialized in forensic accounting and financial investigations. As a former IRS Special Agent, she has spent over a decade uncovering fraud, tracing hidden assets, and helping attorneys and clients navigate complex financial cases with confidence. Her mission is to bring truth, clarity, and justice to every investigation, which I very much appreciate. So I'm so excited to welcome Krista to the show today. Thank you for coming on. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been fun. We've kind of gone back and forth, and we finally were able to get together, and both of us have had kind of chaotic days. So we're going to bring some peace and serenity to people as they learn their rights.
Yes, absolutely.
So kind of tell everybody, what is a financial forensic? I mean, most people, they may hear those terms, especially when they're going through divorce, like, shoot, I just came out of a marriage and I don't even know where anything is. I don't know. I wasn't involved with any of the finances. Like, what is a financial forensics, and when does somebody need it or not?
Sure. There is a big misconception about accountants versus forensic accountants. And I think most people do understand what an accountant does.
Yes.
They're responsible for recording transactions and maintaining financial statements like the balance sheets, income statements. But forensic accounting, we take a much more investigative approach. It's all about piecing together a financial puzzle and analyzing those transactions. And what we're trying to do is trying to find the misconduct, trying to find the fraud, trying to find the anomalies that don't make sense. And so we really put a detective twist, on the financial side of that in order to piece together puzzles.
Okay, I just went against one of my major rules. Usually, right? I'm like so excited to talk to you. I'm just like, So actually, one of the things I love to start the podcast off with is really what got you into doing this, because I like the history. I like to hear what's the history and why are you passionate about helping people with this?
Well,
and then we'll get into the gritty.
Sure. And, I started working, I have an accounting degree and then started working at the IRS right after college. And I started out as a revenue agent. So I was doing audits on small businesses. So I was looking at small business tax returns. And I did that for about 3.5 years and then switched over to the criminal side and became a special agent with the IRS. And, in that job, I was responsible for, looking at potential tax evasion, money laundering, violations of the Bank Secrecy Act. And so I did that for about 10 years and then left to start my own firm. And I can't explain enough, like, how much more rewarding it is to do what we do now, which is to help the victims of fraud.
Yep.
No longer is every case about the victim being the government because people aren't paying taxes. And so It really is. It's so much more rewarding in this kind of work that we're doing now.
So I love that you've made that transition, because I know there's a lot of people that are listening that, or if they aren't, they should be like, they should be sending this to somebody. But if there's somebody that's disadvantaged in the relationship and don't have I had a lady call me several months ago, 58 years old, raised 6 kids. Her husband stepped out, decided he wanted a divorce. And she's like, Becky, I've never known anything about my finances. I've never even known I don't even know anything. Like, where do I start? I just raised the kids. And
that is very common. I mean, I hear that constantly in the consultations that I do, is that, there's usually one person that kind of has control over the finances in a marriage, and that can leave room for some manipulation in a divorce.
Absolutely. And if they do, I mean, usually they have some kind of feeling, gut feeling that there's something going on, or they've been hiding certain things. I mean, what would be how would they know where to start? And do they need a forensics, or what? Yeah. What's those beginning?
Well, let's start with kind of the usual suspects. So we've been doing this, especially with divorces. That's probably the majority of the work that we're doing right now, and have been for the past 5 years. And so we've put together a list of the usual suspects, things that we see constantly in all of the cases. And these are the red flags that if you have these, this is probably time to contact a forensic accountant. And so the very first one is a small business. If there's a small business, there is a big, huge opportunity for somebody to manipulate the numbers.
100%.
About making sure the business doesn't look like it's as profitable as it is.
Yep.
We find, personal expenses that are paid through the business, which does, equal income. And so, again, if things, even if they seem routine, it's worth paying just a little extra attention to those business bank accounts, and just making sure that there aren't the huge red flags in that regard.
So you're saying that if somebody has been married to someone who is in business, or you have been in business, but they are the ones mainly over the finances, that would be one reason to reach out and say, hey, let's just make sure everything's clean.
Yes. I mean, the reality is people do not always report accurately on tax returns.
Yes.
I mean, that part is pretty common.
You think?
But it is. And so even basing just on tax returns, I mean, tax returns tell us what you should see in the bank accounts, but anybody can put anything they want on a tax return at the end of the day. So I know one of the things that I dealt with during my divorce was a lot of fraud. I mean, when I was doing a lot of the forensics myself, so I would subpoena. I mentioned a little bit about this before we started the show, but I would use subpoenas as a way to get the information that I needed, because he wasn't willing to give it to me through discovery. So I went through a process, and then at some point I'm like, I'm done asking for permission. So I went and got subpoenaed, and in the process of subpoenaing and doing the forensics myself, like going through and looking at all of that, there was multiple fraud, basically, that I found. And what do you suggest if somebody, first of all, is just starting this process? I mean, would they call you to say, hey, I think that there might be something that's going on? Or when would they at point like retain you or have you work with them? Or when could they do it on their own? Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, the sooner you bring in somebody that has this expertise, the better off you are. Because even if you're just starting the discovery process, we can give you some insight on what kinds of documents to request. And so, even with some of the attorneys that we work with, not always are they asking for business bank statements. And so that's something that we would always suggest that you get. And so,
Absolutely.
Again, we can get involved right on the early side of things and help with the strategy of how to get all of the information that you need. But at the end of the day, we need the records. And so I'd say probably most cases that we get involved, the discovery process has already started. And so they already have some documents for us to go through. And, our general process, I mean, it's tax returns and bank statements. That's what most everything comes down to. And when we analyze those bank statements, we look at every single transaction, because even if there is $100 transfer, that might, we will trace that down to figure out if that's going to a new bank account that you don't have. And so, we find hidden bank accounts all the time in these cases. And so once we're able to identify those accounts, we can give that information to you and or your attorney, and then they can work on starting to get those new records.
Okay, so here's a question for you: do they need to have an attorney to work with you, or can they work with you if they're pro se? Okay.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think that is something people may not even know. And this is something that I found out through my process, is you don't need to know account numbers to even subpoena a bank. Because when you subpoena a bank, if you have the right information on that subpoena, they'll be able to find the accounts that's associated with that person.
Well, and that's a good point that you just made out, because I'm helping an individual right now who's going through a divorce, and she was doing her own subpoenas. And she issued a subpoena to a nationwide bank.
Yeah.
But she only asked for very specific accounts and names instead of saying any account that he has signatory.
Any and all accounts.
And we ended up finding additional banks that didn't get responses from the subpoena because of that wording. And so even the tiniest little detail in that wording is, could potentially make a difference.
I know that's the reason why I'm in business.
Any signatory control. I mean, that's the winner kind of.
Yeah. And then once you get the information, of course, it's a process, especially with you guys having you as a service to be able to go, okay, I know exactly what to look for. Mm-hmm. And this transaction can lead me to another transaction. So not every case, of course, needs forensics on it. But if there's, obviously, if you think that there's some kind of fraud or some kind of information that's being withheld, mm-hmm. I know for a fact that I won my case because there was no more hiding. And it was just, all I wanted is the facts. And I was
just going to say it's unfortunate because we see that happen so many times in divorce where people just flat out refuse to provide documents. And so you have to resort to issuing a subpoena. And I think that in general is one of the most frustrating things for us in this industry is that there's no consequences. There's rarely consequences for somebody who chooses not to provide the requested information. And it's just super frustrating because I think less people would do it if there was a consequence to, lying and hiding this stuff.
Well, and people think that, they're in contempt of court. And I'm like, well, that's okay. And you know what I mean? So that's the reason why I was like, well, just stop asking for that permission mm-hmm. and go get what you need. And not in the spirit of like, I'm going to get you, in the spirit of like, I just want to know all the facts and information before I go and do a settlement.
Exactly.
I need to know all of it so that I know what I'm making a decision or negotiating or mediating or, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So with what you guys do, what would you say to somebody who is in a situation where there is tax fraud and they know that there's tax fraud? Yeah. Do they report it? Do they not report it? How do they report it? And especially when they're still tied to them, and what are the ramifications of that?
That's a good question, and one that I get quite often. And there's a few different things to kind of consider. So number one, if IRS is going after somebody for tax fraud on the criminal side, the IRS has to prove that it was willfulness. And so the fact that you are an individual tied to a tax return or on a tax return that there's tax fraud doesn't necessarily mean that you are at risk personally for it. So I did want to point that out, especially if it's a spouse's business.
Yeah.
But it is something that you have to consider. The way that we like to use this and use that information, especially if we uncover it, is to use it as leverage to try to get things moving and get a settlement.
100%.
That's the best way to use that information because you don't necessarily want to go report it. Here's the other thing. I have a story. That on how we use this, and it was basically one of the best days of my entire career, including the time I spent with the IRS. Mm-hmm. But this was a situation. So my client was Kate. She had been married for 36 years. She was stay-at-home mom, married to a doctor. They had 4 children. The oldest child was special needs and required constant care. She was convinced that he was up to something. And she refused, she was determined to find it and find help in getting the information. So she hired us to dig through the discovery. And he did have had a practice, a doctor's practice with another individual. So there's 2 partners in the business. Uh-huh. And so we started looking through the discovery documents. Right away, we started noticing a lot of personal credit cards that were paid through the business. And so that was an item that the attorney had not formally requested.
Yep.
So we went through that process. We finally got those documents. In the meantime, Kate happens to get a phone call from somebody who was looking for some donations of watches. And she happened to know that there was a bunch of watches up in her husband's former office. Yeah. So she goes up there to dig out these watches and ends up stumbling across his passwords. And she gets in his email and she prints off some of the most damning emails. And it's between him and his partner, and they're discussing basically tax fraud. I mean, just smoking gun emails.
Yeah.
And so, the emails kept referencing this like accounting grid that didn't make sense to anybody else.
Yeah.
And so again, we pushed and pushed and pushed. And finally, like 2 days before trial, we get this grid. And so me and my team are trying to like decipher it. We're trying to figure out exactly, what it means. And we figured it out. They had been paying personal expenses using company funds and deducting them as business expenses. They were using the accounting grid to keep track of it because they wanted the tax fraud to be equal between the partners. And so I ended up, meeting with the attorney, like, Sunday evening to make sure he understood everything. Trials on Monday. And so we go and we sit down. I sit down with the opposing attorney and his clients and walked him through the fraud and then gave him the damning emails. And we walked out of the room. They came back. Oh, and sorry, this is the most important thing, because I looked at him and I said, he can't testify today. Yeah. He's either going to perjure himself or he's going to admit to tax fraud.
Yep.
And then we walked out of the room. An hour later, they came back and she got an additional $250,000. We bumped his income up from $200,000 a year to $265,000 a year for child support. And we need to pay $25,000 in attorney's fees. And, that's something that wouldn't have come out had we not pushed to get the right records and then be able to use it in the best way possible.
Okay. Krista, you're my best friend.
Well, there's one more thing I wanted to say about the tax fraud thing, because this is something I have a lot of clients that come to me and say, I want to turn them in. And at this point, I know some IRS agents that I used to work with. I could give them on the phone. But one thing that people need to understand is if you are relying on child support as your income, and you go turn in somebody for tax fraud and they end up going to jail, you're losing your income. Yep. And so I just want to make sure that that's something that is being considered as well.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this up. I think this topic right here is, not only have I experienced it, right? I'm experienced it, but I also have other people that I'm working with that are going through this exact same thing, because being a mediator, right? I'm actually a trained mediator. Everything, there is leverage, right? Subpoenas are used as a leverage. I mean, to being able to get to settlement. Now I don't ever recommend people doing it right out of the gate. It's not something that you would do in a collaborative divorce. I mean, that's just not, you don't do that stuff. However, if you're in a situation where you're having to, it's a very powerful tool, because there's no more hiding. Forensics is another one of those tools that, can really uncover things. And most people don't want to get tied up in IRS fraud case, including you, right?
Right.
And so I like that you said that, consider all things before you go there. However, it can be a tool to help navigate into settlement as quickly as possible.
Exactly.
In the right way.
The missing, or you brought up having to do the subpoenas to get records.
Yeah.
And another one of the usual suspects that's probably the most glaring red flag is when there are missing documents. Because in today's digital age, there is no excuse for missing bank statements. So my favorite is when I'll get like 2 years of bank statements, but there's 1 or 2 months in the middle that are missing. Like, you better believe there's a reason for that. Somebody is hiding something. There is something on those months that are missing that they don't want you to see. And so that is probably one of the biggest glaring red flags, that somebody's playing some sort of financial hide and seek.
Well, and by the way, Krista, I don't let that fly. You know what I mean? Like if I do subpoenas for an attorney and they because that's usually in discovery, right? When you're doing discovery and then they hold that back. Right. But if you end up doing a subpoena and a bank holds that back for some reason, doesn't send you, that's my job, with only subpoenas, is to make sure that they're 100% compliant and make sure that we get all the information so that we can make the full picture of what was really going on. And it's so important, because that paperwork it's leverage, but it's also knowledge to putting all the pieces together. I mean, I think you and I are, there's no, there's no accident. My nickname is Becky Brockovich, right? Like I just don't let that stuff slide.
Yeah. I used to have a nickname that was Special K. And that's, I think, being a special agent, my first name is Krista with a K.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was talking to an attorney the other day, and a divorce attorney, and I said, "Yeah, people call me Becky Brockovich," and he's like, "Oh, is that like German?" Like, I'm like, okay, you obviously have not seen the movie,
right?
But yeah. So tell me one thing. I have this question. I think it's a really interesting one, because you often talk about giving people clarity, which is power in divorce. But what does the moment of clarity look like when they're finally see the full picture financially? I think that's a really important question.
It is, and I've never been asked that, so I love this question. So when we get involved in a case, we call our initial service the red flag analysis. And the whole idea behind this is if your gut is telling you that something's not right about a financial situation, then we'll go through all of the documents that you provide to us, and we're looking for the suspicious activity.
Yeah.
So we're looking for the hidden bank accounts, the unreported income, all of the things that are going to make that puzzle put together. But part of our process when we do this is we'll get the tax returns, the bank statements, we'll go through our normal analysis on those. And then we actually put together a PowerPoint presentation, and then we're going to present it to you. Here's the records we looked at. Here's the red flags. And then here's our recommendations on how to get to a final number. Yeah. And so I think that those are so helpful because again, people can follow it through year by year and which accounts we're looking at and what we see. But then at the end of it, we don't just want you to be informed. We want you to be equipped to respond. Yeah. And so we'll put together a list of, additional bank accounts that are missing or missing months or, tax returns that should have been filed that we don't have or any of those other items that are going to, again, help us get to that final number.
Yeah. And the feeling when you actually get all the information and then can make a choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't know this, but my husband that I have now, he's amazing, but his wife left him with 21 cents in the bank. And wow. He never, out of 27 and a half years, was never really involved with the finances. And so, he didn't know a lot of information. And when we did the forensics several months or several years back before the divorce, we could see patterns of things. And I'm like, did you know this? Did you know this? And he's like, no, I had no idea. And I was like, yeah. So, and I said, Beth, guess what? In this marriage, everything's going to be transparent. Like you will never go without not knowing anything again, because that's just, I believe in full transparency. And that's just my personal opinion. Yeah. Everybody's different with what they do.
Well, and I tell you that, we probably have done more income adjustments than anything else. If we find the missing assets, that's great. And that's obviously important, but it goes back again to being a self-employed individual. If child support's based on income and we adjust income based on bank account activity, and you would be shocked at the adjustments that we make. I mean, it's taking $4,000 monthly income and bumping it up to $15,000.
And proving it to the court, because you have to prove it to the court.
And that's the best thing about what we do is because numbers can't lie.
No, I know.
People lie all the time. They can put anything they want on that income and expense sheet, anything they want on a tax return, but the bank statements are third-party records and they don't lie.
So Krista, I find this all the time, and thank you for bringing that up, because people come to me and say, well, yeah, but they say that they make 10,000, but they spend 10,000 on their form. And you're exactly right. They put whatever they want to put in there, and they're actually usually encouraged by their attorney to completely expense it out, so it doesn't say, look, I don't have any money to pay her. Right. I mean, I can't do that. But when you do the forensics and when you do the get the paperwork that's there to say, hey, that's not true, and this is the truth, then it brings you power.
Yes. Really, and all the methodologies that we use are IRS methods. So that's what we take to a trial, and it's pretty powerful.
So can you tell me why the IRS is one of the only places you can't subpoena?
The disclosure laws that are around IRS are insane. And as an example, if I had gotten a call as an IRS special agent and I had a U.S. attorney call me and say, hey, I need a tax return for this person. Nope, sorry. Yeah. They're so protected, and there's anti-disclosure laws, and So yeah, there's no getting any subpoena through to the IRS for the tax returns. You've got to
So
go.
I do have people ask me, like, is there anybody you can't subpoena? I'm like, IRS.
Yep.
Like, I'm like, shoot, that's so crazy.
It
So
is.
I also know that you, just in doing the research, you really are faith-based and integrity-based. I mean, it's important. That's important to you. How does your personal faith and value system influence the way that you help people through this painful part of divorce?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of just how I was built,
Yeah.
Making things even and fair. I'm a Libra, so it's the balance scale. I just want everything to be fair and accurate. And if I'm able to do that for somebody and to, be the person that stands behind him and backs him up is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that bugs me the most about this industry is because right now it's a luxury item. Forensic accounting shouldn't be a luxury item. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do is make forensic accounting way more approachable. And so we do all flat rate fees, all based on volume of documents. And, there's no hourly fees at all. So you give us a set of records, we're going to do the analysis. We will follow those records however you need us to, including analyzing it, presenting it, et cetera. And it's, again, just an approachable fee that helps the victims. That's what we're here for.
So thank you for that, because a lot of people are afraid to reach out because they just feel like the bill is going to get so big.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you ask forensics, just even when someone comes to me and says, hey, I have a financial forensic, person, I'm like, it's probably expensive.
Yeah.
And the fact that you go to bat and advocate for them on a flat fee, that is so, I hope people are listening to how valuable that is, to be able to say, hey, this is my situation. And I think I read somewhere also in your stuff that you take any case. It doesn't matter if it's a big case or if it's a little case, or if someone doesn't have a lot of money, you can work with them. Because I think that's a scary part for when people are left with very little to deal with during a divorce.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we really do. We try to work with you however that turns out, and we're very flexible with it. And it's part of the reason that I'm able to offer these services at a lower price, because it's so unfortunate that people will base how good you are on how much you charge per hour, and that's what we're trying to get away from. And so our firm, this firm is built on all former feds. So we've got former FBI, we have former IRS, we have over 230 years now of experience on this team. Wow. And so that's why we're able to do this efficiently. And we can testify on it, and we can charge a much lower rate because, again, all my team members are mostly retired agents.
That is amazing. And where are you guys located, by the way?
So I live in Maryville, Missouri, but most of my contractors are in Kansas City and St. Louis. But we have cases everywhere from Hawaii to New Hampshire.
Yeah. So. Where were you when I was in Hawaii? I was doing my own forensics, and I just oh my gosh, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, we hope to change the game here. That's the goal. And so as agents retire, I try to seek them out and have them join the team. And again, we see the same things over and over. So we've got our system. We know what we're doing, and we'll find it. And here's the thing: if we don't find any red flags, we still offer peace of mind.
Yeah.
And so that's huge too. And I can remember one case I did where we didn't find red flags. And my client, she was angry at us. She was really upset and on the verge of yelling at us during our presentation. And she called me about 2 weeks later and actually thanked me, because now she knew that she was hoping that there was some other account there with a ton of money in there. And it just wasn't. That's not what we were able to find. But
so that's the very first thing that you do is you do an assessment of those red flags.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I hope people are really listening and wanting to reach out, because if you suspect it, and like you said earlier, if it's something that you feel that something's not right, then it probably isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And to have somebody be able to verify that, especially with all the expertise that you have around you on your team, that's so valuable.
Yeah. Wow. And there's one other red flag I definitely want to touch on.
Yeah.
it's kind of goes with what we're saying right now, which is a lifestyle that doesn't match income. That's another huge red flag. So if somebody's, reporting income on, it's like a ramen noodle budget, but they're living this lifestyle that's, much more glamorous, then that's a huge red flag that there's something in the financials that we could probably uncover.
Yeah, I actually have someone that I knew that those red flags happened right after the divorce. So he claimed he had no money. And almost immediately after the divorce, he was bragging about going and buying a multi-million-dollar property. And she's like, with what? And so at that time I was working with an attorney and I said, can she reopen her divorce case with this new information that she has? And he said, yes, she can. And we actually talked about it on one of the podcasts with one of the attorneys. He says, yes, whether you should reopen your divorce case once you understand the fraud that happened after the fact is a personal decision. Do you know what I mean? Because that's a whole nother battle. But yeah, but again, I think people going through divorce are hypersensitive to that inner voice that's going, look, something's not right. And I think that's the point is if they're not, if you feel like there's something off, please reach out to Krista and her team, because you guys have the expertise to be able to say, hey, this doesn't look right, and let's do a little investigation to give you the power that you need in order to settle for something fair. And I love that you said fair and equitable. I mean, we're not here to gouge people. Like not revenge or any of that kind of stuff, but you are entitled to what is fair and equitable. And I remember one thing real quick, Krista, that my attorney, when I finally had an attorney in my case, I called him and I was trying to prove all these different things that I had done to create value in my marriage. And it was a short marriage, but he says, Becky, I don't care if you sat on a couch, ate bonbons, and gained 100 pounds. You are still entitled to half of the increase.
Yes.
And a lot of women that have raised children and haven't made money or been in an financial abusive situation, we often feel like we have to prove ourselves. And I said to him that day, thank you so much for not making me have to prove my very existence in this relationship and in this marriage as a woman. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, you're still entitled, and you need to know what those rights are so that you know what you're fighting for. And if you want to walk away once you know all the information, that's fine. But at least do the forensics, do the research, and know the rights.
Right.
And so thank you so much for your time. I know you've got a very busy schedule. And you've even got an event tonight that you're doing for one of our networks. So thank you for the efforts, and thank you for your passion. I love people on this show that have the same passion. And I
feel that's from you too. I mean, from the moment we spoke, we're both in this for the right reasons. So
yeah. Well, we'll definitely collaborate and help send stuff each other's way. So thank you so much for being on the show today. Again, I'm the host, Becky Sampson, with Krista. And join us on the next episode. We'll talk to you later. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Divorcing Strong podcast. This episode is sponsored by Only Subpoenas, where we make subpoenas simple, powerful, and 100% compliant. If you're having a hard time getting the information you need to settle for a fair and equitable divorce, let us help you. Whether you're an attorney or you're navigating divorce on your own, subpoenas can uncover the truth, secure the evidence you need, and level the playing field. To see how we can help, book an appointment by visiting our website at onlysubpoenas.com.